It was a bright, sunny afternoon as the plane took off from New York City, cruising smoothly through the skies on its way to Los Angeles. The hum of the engines blended with the gentle clinking of glasses and the rustling of newspapers. Inside the first-class cabin, Vanessa Williams, a poised and powerful black woman in her early 40s, sat in her reserved window seat. Dressed in a sharp, tailored red suit and a crimson blouse, she exuded an air of confidence, her posture straight, her eyes scanning her laptop screen as she prepared for an important business call. Her mind was on her latest deal, a major partnership that would solidify her company's position in the tech world. Vanessa was used to being in control, and she relished the solitude that flying offered, a brief moment to catch her breath before diving back into the pressures of running a multi-million-dollar company. But her peace was short-lived. As the plane leveled out and the flight attendants began their rounds, a tall, middle-aged white man in a crisp, light blue suit caught her attention. He strode confidently down the aisle, his eyes scanning the cabin until they landed on Vanessa. His lips curled into a smirk as he made his way towards her. Vanessa raised an eyebrow, sensing trouble, but she remained seated, knowing that she was well within her rights. The man stopped in front of her and gave her a once-over, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, I believe you're in my seat," he said, his voice oozing with arrogance. He didn't even wait for her to respond before he added, "Or perhaps you don't know how to read a ticket, huh?" Vanessa, momentarily taken aback by his blatant rudeness, glanced at the seat number printed on her boarding pass. "This is my seat, sir," she replied, her tone calm yet firm. "You must be mistaken." The man scoffed loudly, leaning in so close that she could smell his overpowering cologne. "No mistake here, sweetheart. I'm sure someone like you wouldn't be flying first class. It's not really for people like you, is it?" Vanessa's jaw clenched, but she refused to react to his insult. She had dealt with this kind of disrespect before. However, she couldn't let it slide this time, not when he had insulted her intelligence and questioned her place in the world. He continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "I'd suggest you move before things get uncomfortable. You don't belong here." His words were laced with disdain, making it clear he didn't believe someone like her, a black woman, should be seated in the luxury of first class. Vanessa's mind raced, but she held her ground, her gaze never wavering. She could feel the tension building in the cabin, the whispers of other passengers growing louder. Yet, despite the offensive nature of the man's words, she remained calm, prepared to handle the situation with grace and authority. This wasn't the first time she had faced such insults, and it wouldn't be the last. But today, she would deal with it in a way that would make him regret underestimating her. The flight attendants, noticing the escalating confrontation, quickly rushed over to see what was happening. Vanessa remained seated, her back straight and her expression calm, but inside, she could feel the familiar sting of frustration building. She had fought her entire life to rise above the limits society tried to place on her, and here was this man trying to tear down everything she had built with his entitled attitude. The man, refusing to back down, stood his ground. His chest puffed out, and his eyes gleamed with a sense of superiority. "This is absurd. I demand you move," he sneered, his voice growing louder. "You can't be in first class. You're probably just a token black woman, lucky to be here because of some charity case." His words were sharp, meant to provoke, and they stung deeper than Vanessa was willing to admit. The flight attendants, caught between trying to calm the situation and ensuring the rest of the passengers didn't feel uncomfortable, glanced at each other awkwardly. One of them, a young woman with brown hair tied into a neat bun, nervously cleared her throat and addressed the man. "Sir, please, let's not escalate this any further. I will check the seat reservations immediately." Vanessa locked eyes with the flight attendant, her lips pressing into a tight smile. She was used to being underestimated, being placed in uncomfortable situations where her presence seemed to challenge preconceived norms. But this was different. This time, the man wasn't just questioning her place in the seat, he was questioning her right to exist in that space. As the flight attendant left to check the reservations, the man turned to Vanessa, sneering down at her from his height. "You think just because you've got a fancy title, you can sit wherever you want," he scoffed. "You're nothing but a cog in the machine. People like you don't belong in the same rooms as the rest of us." Vanessa's patience was wearing thin, but she remained composed. She had learned long ago that reacting with anger would only fuel the fire, but speaking with authority, with intelligence, could shut him down without a word. She took a deep breath, leaning slightly forward in her seat, her voice calm but undeniably firm. "Let me make one thing clear, sir," she began, her gaze unwavering. "I worked hard for everything I have. No one handed me anything. So before you go around making assumptions about people you don't know, perhaps you should take a moment to think about who you're really talking to." Her voice was steady, but there was a sharpness to her words that made the man hesitate. For a brief moment, Vanessa saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by arrogance. He wasn't going to back down, not without a fight. "Are you done with your little speech?" he snapped, clearly frustrated, not used to being challenged. "Get up, or I'll have you removed." Vanessa didn't budge. Instead, she sat back in her seat, her posture straight and commanding. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her or belittle her any longer. As the flight attendant returned, holding a tablet in her hands, Vanessa was ready to take control of the situation. But the man wasn't finished. "This isn't over," he muttered, though he had clearly lost his earlier swagger. Vanessa just smiled, waiting for the truth to come to light. The flight attendant returned to the scene, her face a mixture of professionalism and concern. She approached the man with a slight hesitation, holding the tablet in her hands, her eyes flicking nervously between him and Vanessa. It was clear from the way the flight attendants had been acting that they were already aware of the tension, but no one had expected things to escalate this far. "I'm terribly sorry, sir," the flight attendant said, looking at the man. "There seems to have been a mix-up. According to our system, your seat is in row 2B, not 2F. The man's face froze, a deep flush creeping up his neck as his arrogance crumbled into sheer embarrassment. For a moment, he said nothing, staring at the flight attendant in disbelief. It was as if the world had suddenly stopped, his sense of entitlement shattered. He glanced at Vanessa, the smugness he had once radiated quickly turning into unease. "Wait, what?" "No, that's impossible," the man blurted out, his voice shaking with frustration. "I've been sitting here for over 10 minutes. This is my seat. I booked it months ago." He was panicking now, not knowing how to salvage the situation. The flight attendant, unfazed by his outburst, remained calm. "Sir, we've checked the reservation again. Your seat is indeed 2B, a few rows behind." She glanced at Vanessa, her expression apologetic but respectful. "I apologize for the confusion, ma'am. I'll be happy to help you get your seat back." Vanessa simply nodded, her calm composure still intact. The man, now visibly defeated, took a step back and glared at her. His voice was a low growl as he muttered, "I'll make sure you regret this, you know. This isn't over." But his words barely reached her. She didn't need to respond. He had already lost. Vanessa turned her attention to the flight attendants, her voice steady and polite. "Thank you for your help. Please just make sure there are no further disruptions." The man, now visibly humiliated, trudged toward the rear of the cabin, his face flushed with anger. He didn't look at Vanessa again, too proud to apologize, too ashamed to face her. The whispers from the other passengers grew louder, many of them casting furtive glances toward Vanessa, but she remained unfazed, knowing that his defeat had nothing to do with her. It had everything to do with his own unwillingness to recognize the power of respect and equality. As the man took his seat in the second row, Vanessa leaned back in hers, the weight of the moment lifting off her shoulders. But the satisfaction wasn't in the confrontation itself. It was in the knowledge that in this small, confined space, she had stood her ground against someone who thought he could take what didn't belong to him. With the resolution settled and the atmosphere beginning to calm, Vanessa allowed herself a quiet smile. Her focus now shifted back to her laptop, the noise and tension of the cabin fading into the background as she prepared to finish the deal that had brought her on this flight in the first place. But as she typed her final notes, a quiet realization dawned on her. Power didn't always have to come from being the loudest in the room. Sometimes, it came from simply owning the space you stood in. Just as Vanessa settled back into her seat, preparing to resume her work and put the incident behind her, the peaceful hum of the airplane was shattered by a loud, angry voice from the front of the plane. "Someone better fix this, or I'm not flying on this damn plane anymore," the man, still fuming with anger, yelled, his voice reverberating through the cabin. Vanessa's head snapped up, her calm demeanor now shifting into alertness. The situation, which she had hoped would end peacefully, was spiraling into chaos. The man, now visibly red-faced and seething, had clearly lost all control. His ranting continued, "I'm not going to sit back here with the common folk. This is an outrage. Do you know who I am?" His words were becoming increasingly aggressive as he stormed down the aisle, past confused and nervous passengers. A flight attendant quickly approached him, trying to calm him down. "Sir, please, let's lower our voices and not escalate this situation," she pleaded, her tone even but firm. But the man wasn't listening. His anger was a wild storm, his frustration aimed at the woman who had dared to stand up to him earlier. The atmosphere in the cabin grew tense. Passengers were muttering to each other, some exchanging uncomfortable glances, others just staring ahead, trying to avoid the scene unfolding before them. Vanessa could feel the rise in temperature in the air, but she remained seated, still composed, her hands resting on her lap. The man's shouting grew more frantic, his words harsh and bitter. "I demand that you land this plane right now. I will not be treated like this," he shouted, drawing the attention of every single person around him. His voice echoed down the aisle, clearly intending to make everyone aware of his displeasure. "You have no idea who I am. I own half of this airport." He continued, not making any sense, but only growing louder with every word. Vanessa watched him with a mixture of disbelief and quiet determination. Her mind moved quickly, calculating her next move. This man wasn't just angry, he was dangerous, destabilizing the whole flight with his unhinged demands. The more he raged, the more he alienated himself from reality. With a smooth and confident motion, Vanessa stood up from her seat and walked calmly toward the cockpit door. She wasn't panicking, she wasn't acting out of emotion. This wasn't the time for reaction. This was the time for action. The passengers could sense her resolve. They knew she was a woman who meant business, even if they didn't know exactly who she was. The pilot opened the door, surprised to see her standing there. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Vanessa nodded, her voice steady and assured. "There's a situation that needs to be handled. I think it's best if we make an emergency landing. The flight can't continue with this level of disruption." The pilot hesitated for a moment, looking down at the controls, then back at her. Vanessa's unshakable confidence won him over. He knew it was the right call. "Understood, ma'am," he said, his expression shifting to one of determination. Vanessa made her way back to her seat as the plane began its descent, the man's shouts becoming more muffled as the cabin lights dimmed in preparation for the landing. The other passengers were now silent, many watching Vanessa with a new respect. She had taken control of a situation that no one else had been able to handle. As the plane began to lower, Vanessa allowed herself to relax just slightly. The job wasn't finished yet, but she had done what needed to be done. In moments like this, when chaos threatened to overrun the calm, it was the quiet, composed force of will that proved stronger than any noise. The plane touched down smoothly, its wheels screeching slightly as it made contact with the runway. The once chaotic atmosphere of the cabin had shifted into a heavy silence. The angry man, who had caused such a ruckus just moments ago, was now being escorted off the aircraft by airport security, his head hung low in defeat. His tantrum had left him with nothing but embarrassment and a deep sense of humiliation. As the passengers disembarked, there was a noticeable change in the energy in the air. A few people glanced at Vanessa with silent admiration, others with a sense of awe. She had done what many would have been too scared to attempt, she had handled a difficult, uncomfortable situation with grace, with control, and most importantly, with intelligence. While others might have been tempted to get caught up in the chaos, Vanessa had remained unshaken. She sat for a moment in her seat, staring out the window as the jet bridge was extended. Her thoughts weren't on the man who had tried to undermine her, or the trouble he had caused. Instead, her mind drifted back to the flight itself, to the importance of her business deal and the upcoming meetings waiting for her. She had places to be, and no amount of small-minded hostility was going to stop her from getting there. As she stood up and gathered her things, the flight attendants approached her once again. "Ms. Williams," the lead attendant said, her voice full of gratitude. "Thank you for everything. You kept your composure under pressure, and honestly, we didn't know how to handle that without your help. You were incredible." Vanessa smiled, her calm demeanor still intact. "It was nothing. Just doing what had to be done," she replied, her voice steady but kind. She made her way off the plane and into the terminal, her head held high. The small crowd of passengers who had witnessed the incident silently parted to let her through, and though no one spoke, Vanessa could feel their respect. It wasn't just about what she had done in the moment, it was about how she had done it. It was about the quiet power of someone who knew exactly who they were, and who wouldn't let anyone, no matter how arrogant, dictate the terms of their journey. As she exited the terminal, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from her company's board, congratulating her on successfully closing the deal she had been working on during the flight. She smiled to herself. It had been a long day, but she had done it. She had shown the world that no matter how small or petty someone's insult might be, it could never take away her strength or her purpose. In that moment, with the setting sun casting its golden light over the city skyline, Vanessa Williams knew she had won. Not because of the seat she had fought for, but because she had kept her dignity intact in the face of adversity. And that, she knew, was more powerful than anything anyone could take from her.